So I listened to the audiobook American Sarengeti by Dan Flores. Um, I don't know. I really didn't enjoy it all. The narrator itself was just so bland and boring, monotone voice. It was definitely a struggle to get through the whole book. Probably took me 3 weeks. I just couldn't get into it at all. I just had to keep turning it off just because it was so boring and bland with the narrator. I mean, part of the reason why I didn't really like the book was the narrator, but the book itself was more like a history book. I guess that's sort of what it was meant to be. It was like the history, but it was more like a school history book than like an actual like non-fiction history style book. Meaning it was more like, this is what happened, this is the reason for it, instead of like telling an actual story, at least in my opinion. I listened to Dan Flores on the Joe Rogan podcast talking. I was like, oh, he sounds like a smart guy. It might be interesting to read when he was on promoting the book. So that's why I gave it a shot, but it definitely fell short of my expectations. I mean, it did talk about like the coyotes and, the bison and wolves, and a couple other animals like that, the pronghorns. I mean, it was nice to hear about, the history and what happened to them, like how American people basically like wiped them out, and how some of it's starting to like some of them are recovering, but it was just, like I said, it was too much of a history book style listen than an actual like history book, like a book that like a book on history that you could actually dive into, which would have been nice if you can actually like dive in and like feel the story progress instead of being told more like facts and this is what happened, this is why it happened, style type book. So I'd avoid it if you can, unless you're really into that style, but definitely not. I wanted to be entertained, and it was definitely not entertaining for me, and it just took forever to get through. I don't know. Maybe, I guess if you're a historian, you'd like it more. Talking about like some of the things we did like back in the day to the bison just to wipe them out, and like the fur trade, how it went from like animal to animal, or what we did to get rid of the wolves through like poisoning, and where the coyotes spread out through the U.S., and how pronghorns were actually probably more prevalent than we really think, and we actually probably wiped them out from their big herds that were probably just as big as like bison. But I mean, some of those little facts were interesting, and even like about the bears, the Great Plains bears and stuff like that. I mean, that sort of thing was kind of interesting, but those facts and like interesting things were just so hit and miss, and it lacked of like a real actual story. So I was definitely disappointed in that book, and really that's all I really want to say about it, because I'm just glad I got it done and over with, and it took way longer than I expected.